The following news announcement was first made in 2013 and relates to our mission work. It was 10 years ago that our incorporation, Trojan Horse International, was registered to enable us to work in the jails of the Philippines. It was formerly called Trojan Horse International Christian Ministries, and in that name we went on a mission to the Philippines in 2001, and in particular to New Bilibid Maximum Security Prison, the largest prison in Asia's Far East. Yesterday was my first visit to one of our jails here in the UK. It was HMP Lewis. I was invited by one of the prison chaplains to tell my story as told in my recent publication, Converted on LSD Trip, alternatively From Crime to Christ. This book tells the story of my brother Michael and I, who were both young criminals during the 60s and were sentenced to prison for malicious wounding and carrying a firearm without a licence. We both had been converted from crime to Christ and had come to tell our story. I'd been sentenced to Dover Borstal in 1967 and Michael to HM Prison Maidstone. Michael was older than I and had previous convictions, so he was sentenced to a 2-year term as a convict, whilst I was sentenced to Borstal training. Michael had done time in Oxford detention centres on 2 occasions and his own Borstal training in Rochester in 1966. We started our prison sentences together at HM Prison Canterbury, after which I was sent to Wormwood Scrubs before allocated to Dover Borstal, and Michael was sent on to Maidstone Prison where one of the Crays was doing time. Our mission to the Philippines was to bring assistance and help to Michael, my brother, who had been sentenced to a 16-year prison sentence in 1995 in the Philippines. And he had become a Christian and was baptised in the prison by another former inmate, Lucas P. Dangatton, in 1999. Michael John Clark, a British national, was sentenced to a 16-year prison term in the Philippines in 1995 for a crime he never committed. Our mission was to preach the gospel and to assist other prison inmates on their own road of reformation. There were quite a number of inmates at Lewis Prison, about 50 in all, that came for various reasons. That was a good turnout. I felt warmly received and was free to tell my former life of crime. I relived some of those times as I told my story to these prisoners. I recalled my wayward lifestyle until my conversion from crime to Christ on the 16th of January 1970. I told of my brother's life, how he was subsequently arrested and sentenced to 16 years in 1995. But sadly, he died of tuberculosis in May 2005, the year he was due to be released, and before our vision of bringing help to many was realised. I was able to say why I wrote the first edition of my book, Converted on LSD Trip. I was also able to tell them my intentions of telling the same story as a punk rock opera called Borstal Boy, to be performed live in prisons. And also of the permissions that I had received to perform this opera in HMP Aylesbury, which is the largest young person's prison in the UK. Aylesbury is a town where Michael and I grew up during the 60s. My visit to HMP Lewis was the result of and after a request by prison chaplains to provide over 400 copies of a special edition of my book called Borstal Boys to be given freely to prison inmates. Here is the foreword. Samuel Nocheramando, prison chaplain, HMP Nottingham. This moving story demonstrates the goodness and mercy of God, and it is clear proof that no one is beyond God's grace, mercy and love. Whatever wrongdoings we do, God continues to call us back to him, and if we accept, he fulfills his plan for us to give us hope for the future. The inmates and staff and religious volunteers listened intensely and asked very good and serious questions relating to my own story. One inmate responded informing us of the help that he'd received whilst he was at Feltham Prison through a production of a drama, so indicating his support to our proposal of performing our punk rock opera in a prison. I believe the word of God was sown into some good ground that day. Now let others water, and let God give the increase. I felt privileged to speak at that meeting and to be among those inmates and people. Why not write to the chaplaincy and ask for a first-hand report of that meeting? I am privileged to announce that William Pollock, a friend of my brother Michael and former inmate of New Billerud Prison, is now a pastor of Baguio Christ-Centred Churches, Incorporated, and runs a theological institute for Bible students, and is also the bishop of 10 affiliated Christ-Centred churches in the Philippines. If you would like to hear more of this great, remarkable story, I am available to share this with you personally in your prison, church or group. Email me nbpttc@yahoo.co.uk. Telephone number 07411 990007.